Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
There's a very severe teacher shortage, certainly in the case of blacks and other minorities. The shortages are even greater because for a long time, teaching was one of those professions, along with a few other occupations, that blacks could go into easily with not very much resistance, and certainly there were usually opportunities there.
The NTE is a standardized test, and a lot of people, they just don't do well on standardized tests because they may be culturally biased, maybe they weren't made up by a lot of blacks. You don't really know. And some of the questions that were asked on the art and music section, I have never seen some of those questions before.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Hinton.
And I'm Genevieve Stewart. For more than a century, education has been considered the best hope for black people. But teacher shortages throughout Louisiana are now threatening that hope.
Why is there a teacher shortage, and what impact will the shortage have on the education of black children? These are just two questions we'll tackle today on Folks.
Everybody's just folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks to live, folks got to give, folks got to care, ooh, folks got to share.
Shortly after the end of the Civil War, a white member of the Louisiana State Legislature passed a yard full of black children in New Orleans. Is this a school, the legislator asked? Yes, he was told. For blacks, asked the legislator? Evidently, replied one child. Well, said the legislator, throwing up his hands, I have seen many an absurdity, but this is the climax. But it wasn't the climax at all. Actually, it was the beginning of a great awakening of black minds. You see, here in the South, schooling for blacks had been frowned on. Many whites were sure blacks would be spoiled by an education.
The idea for free education for all in the South was basically a black idea. Before the Civil War, there were some free public schools, but there were a number of private schools and academies. But there had been no first-rate system for general public education. It wasn't until slaves became free the blacks began organizing classes in schools for their own children. Soon, lower and middle-class whites began setting up schools for their children. One man who was a major influence on black education here in the South was Booker T. Washington. Washington, born a slave in Virginia in 1856, taught himself to read using a spelling book. He believed in the importance of vocational education. By learning to do useful jobs, Washington said blacks could improve their lots economically, a belief that today has proven true for a lot of blacks.
May 17, 1954 was an important day in the area of education for blacks. That was the day the United States Supreme Court banned segregation in public schools by ruling separate but equal schools would never be truly equal. The case was Brown versus the Board of Education. George E.C. Hayes, Thurgood Marshall, and James Naybrid argued the historic case. Despite that landmark decision, efforts are still continuing today to desegregate many public school systems.
The gains made by blacks in the area of education have been great. So great that the gains have created one problem that was not anticipated, a shortage of black teachers.
There's a very severe teacher shortage, certainly in the case of blacks and other minorities. The shortages are even greater because for a long time, teaching was one of those professions, along with a few other occupations, that blacks could go into easily with not very much resistance, and certainly there were usually opportunities there. Now we find black students, particularly very highly able black students, and we have some very highly able black students also in our teacher education program, going into many of the technical fields, business, science, mathematics, engineering. there are a great many more opportunities, and therefore people have moved in those directions.
One thing that is hurting the teaching profession that people fail to recognize is that there are more opportunities for female teachers or potential female teachers than there's ever been before in our society. Business, industry, banking, all of those are looking for females. A few years ago when I was coming into the profession, my wife was in the profession, about the only profession available to the female was the teaching profession. Now horizons are broadened, and I think this is excellent. This is really great as far as opportunities for females elsewhere are concerned, but it certainly is hurting the teacher supply. The fact that fewer boys and girls are choosing to enter the profession when they are freshmen, sophomores, juniors in college means that there are going to be fewer teachers.
Especially in the areas of math and science, and there is rather a teacher shortage. And plus I've heard it on the news that there is, and a lot of us tend to believe that it is due primarily to the NTE and to salaries.
Teachers deserve better salaries. Teaching has been a much maligned profession, and I think it has not been a fair treatment. This country, and certainly the general public, are quick to criticize what's not being done in education. And not enough people really think about the fact that even though a $14,000 starting salary for a bachelor's degree student may not be considered that bad for 10 months, coupled with the other benefits that are given by most school systems, you can't compete, whether it's in mathematics and science or just in any other general profession. You cannot compete with a salary at that range. I think state legislatures have to make it their business, if they want to improve the quality of education in states, to make sure that teachers will receive some more competitive salaries.
Poor salaries isn't the only factor contributing to the teacher shortage. There's the NTE, the National Teacher Examination. It is a standardized test required for teacher certification here in Louisiana. As a teacher, how do you feel about using the NTE as a criterion for certification?
Well, I feel that the NTE should not be the sole determinant as to whether a teacher is certified or not. First place, the NTE does not necessarily test those things that are actually done within the classroom. And it also, in my estimation, opinion, does not determine whether a teacher is a good teacher or not. For someone who's taken the NTE, let's say, who makes a high score on it, let's say, they may not be one who remains in the classroom. They may go on to some other type business or something else that requires, let's say, a lot of knowledge that they can use someplace else, sophisticated knowledge, if I may use that terminology.
And what do future black teachers think about the NTE?
The NTE is a standardized test, and I have trouble taking standardized tests, and a lot of other people can't always take standardized tests. I don't feel that a test in education is a good way of measuring. How can you tell, just because you pass this test, that you're going to be a good teacher? This is knowledge, book knowledge. The world of teaching involves more than book knowledge. It involves dealing with people, actual situations that are not even covered in a lot of books. And I don't feel that the NTE can measure this, can say, hey, you passed the NTE, you're going to be a fantastic teacher, or you failed the NTE, you can't teach. And I don't think that this should be, that we should be penalized because of this.
I don't think it should play a major role in crediting teachers, whether they should teach or not, because the NTE is a standardized test, and a lot of people, they just don't do well on standardized tests because they may be culturally biased, maybe they weren't made by a lot of blacks. You don't really know. And some of the questions that were asked on the art and music section, I have never seen some of those questions before.
I really don't think that the NTE is a well way of evaluating teachers and seeing if they're qualified for teaching, because of the fact that the type of questions that's asked on the NTE I really don't think that it has anything to do with your capability of teaching.
What impact do you think the NTE has had on the supply of minority teachers in Louisiana?
I think it's obvious that the number of minority teachers available for employment has decreased. Many of the minority teachers are choosing not to take the NTE and therefore are not available for certification and are probably going elsewhere to teach. There are a number of parishes that still have minority affirmative action programs that have to keep a certain supply of minority teachers, but many minority teachers are going elsewhere.
You run into a serious problem when you have a standardized test being your sole and major criterion for entrance into a profession. The fact that someone does well on an examination does not necessarily mean that that person is going to be good at that particular skill. The person may have some great knowledge sense, but may not be able to apply those same skills in the classroom to students. Based upon also what I've read, the historically black colleges have tended to do not as well on the examinations. At the same time, I think that most of our students are prepared very well in professionalized courses. I haven't taken the exam. I need to take a look at it. I need to be able to evaluate it for myself. Lots of criticisms are thrown at the National Teachers Examination, but I do believe that if you're going to admit individuals into a profession, there should be some kind of mix of criteria and requirements.
Many students, particularly minority students who have taken the NTE, say it is difficult. During the 1981-82 school year, 146 students completed the education program at Southern University, but only 20 took the NTE. Out of that 20, only 8 students passed the test. The picture wasn't much different at Grambling. 76 students completing the education program, 31 took the NTE, but only 6 students passed. Why are blacks having difficulty with the test?
One of the things that happened at both Grambling and Southern is the potential teachers chose not to take the NTE and therefore not to seek certification in the state of Louisiana. Arkansas, Texas, others I'm sure are reaping the benefits or have opportunities for taking those teachers. The first 2 or 3 times that the National Teachers Exam was given, there were a large number of graduates from Grambling and Southern that attempted the NTE. Since then, there has been a declining number up until perhaps last year, this year. Now, Grambling and Southern are both putting a renewed emphasis on the National Teachers Examination, taking the National Teachers Examination. We are seeing a greater number of teachers taking the exam and greater numbers passing the exam at both Southern and Grambling. And I think the future there looks good.
Historically, it just seems that blacks and other minorities have not fared very well on standardized tests. I mean, admittedly, I was not a great test taker when I was in school. I never felt that I was not good in what I did. And I dare say you can probably talk to a lot of people who are in major fields and occupations today who can admit some of those same stories. I think because of track records not having been as great in the past also, I think that's one of the reasons why some of that anxiety builds up. There are certain students with a certain level of confidence that say, I don't care how difficult the test is, I know I've got to pass it and I'm going to do the best job that I possibly can.
I've taken a test twice. My first time I've taken it was in my junior year, and I really thought it was very difficult because in education you're required to take only a low level of courses, and when you take the test, say for instance the music questions they would ask you, I mean, there's no way you can answer them because of the music that you took in your college year. It was just an elementary music class, and it was no way. So the second time I took the test, I passed it. And my way of passing it was going through courses at Xavier that they taught, and at SUNO, gone out looking for the classes. The schools that had the class. And I really think that really helps a lot.
The Commons the old Commons was the problem, more than the area examinations. In other words, there's a lack of a general education, mathematics, science, social studies, literature, fine arts. And then, of course, we're adding a new dimension now, and we don't have results yet to see how well they're going to do in the essay. In the new examination, we have added a listening and an essay dimension. And we do not have our preliminary, the test was offered for the first time, or administered, I should say, in November. We do not yet have the test results. We do not know how the minorities are doing. But I would say that overall, the area has not been the problem as it has been general education.
Some teachers and students who have taken the NTE feel the test is culturally biased.
Some of the art, I think it was because I have not been exposed to different artists and different art paintings, not until I've gotten to college. But before that, I've never been exposed to, those kind of paintings and stuff like that.
The exam is made by people who come from certain cultures, but it is given to people who are from many cultures. And I would say, yes, it probably is.
Anytime we enter a testing arena, there are some people whose background is not of a test-taking nature. But I think that to say that the items on the exam or that the opportunities on the exam disproportionately hurt one culture or another, I don't think that's true. There are too many efforts being made by national committees that look at the National Teachers Exam, by research on the National Teachers Exam, to assure that the questions on the exam do not bias it against one population or another population. We have the same problem with the State Basic Skills Program. The opportunity for us to ask questions that are biased is there, but we take special care through involving minorities and involving groups of teachers to assure that the questions that we ask are as culture fair as we can make them. I know that the NTE, builders of the NTE, took the same precautions we took in trying to work with minorities and expert groups to assure that that did not happen.
The ETS, at least in terms of my experience relative to the new validation process, ETS has done a marvelous job in terms of being sensitive to minority problems. After all, they want to avoid a court decision. No one involved with ETS wants to be unfair. Those are the top psychometricians in the United States. I'm convinced that the test is fair, at least the new one that I'm acquainted with, and I'm convinced that ETS did a very fine job in seeing to it that minority concerns were considered very seriously. They had sensitivity panels relative to the various questions. There were thousands of professors of all kinds of racial and ethnic backgrounds. And so I think at least the new test that I'm dealing with primarily, see, in this new validation, we're not validating the area exams. We're only validating the core battery exam, which replaces the old Commons. The other 20 area exams which we use are still in place. They were validated in 1977, and we have not interfered with those whatsoever. But in terms of the new core battery, I'm convinced it's a fair test for minorities.
Many students have opted not to take the NTE and to seek teaching jobs outside of Louisiana where the test isn't required. At the same time, many parishes are recruiting teachers from out of state.
Why are Louisiana parishes recruiting teachers out of state?
I have a question about myself. I really can't say why they may come. Maybe it's because of moving from one area to another. But I doubt seriously if the persons are coming here because of salary. And the NTE is required in most states. However, I realize there are other states that have, the total number of points to be gained on the test should be, some of them are pretty near those that are required in Louisiana. However, there are some states that have lower numbers.
Our salaries, Genevieve, have improved a great deal. They're not as bad as they were. We now rank 22nd in the United States in average salaries. We've jumped 8 places because of PIPs. We were ranked 30th. We're now ranked 22nd with an average salary, with PIPs that is, of $18,400. So we've gained 8 notches since the innovation of PIPs.
Since we have entered with the professional improvement program, okay, Louisiana's average teacher in Louisiana now ranks about 17th in the nation in salaries. A few years ago, that was like 25th. So we are beginning to offer better salaries in Louisiana than we had over the past. I think we're getting closer and closer to the national average, and we may, with PIPs, be a little above the national average now in what we offer and what the average teacher in Louisiana makes. I think there are some other things that attract people to Louisiana. Orleans, as an organization and as a town, attracts people to that. Many of the towns where universities are located attract professors whose spouses teach in the public schools. And so East Baton Rouge, Shreveport, and some of the others where there is a university located will have professors whose spouses are in the public schools, and I think that helps attract people to Louisiana. I think Louisiana is a pretty good state to live in, and so we are attracting some teachers from out of the state. Many of the people who enter the state in some other profession, the energy profession, the environmental profession, that are bringing people into the state, have spouses that work in education, and some of those are coming into the state. So there are a number of things that are attracting people to move to Louisiana and to teach in Louisiana.
There is now a new NTE, and Dr. Peck is confident that the new test will increase the number of minority teachers.
There were some new sections added to the National Teachers Exam, as you probably are aware. There was a section on listening skills and a section on writing skills. And then there's the session on general knowledge and knowledge in the professional knowledge. It seems to me that distribution and the work that ETS has done to see that it was as fair as possible to all the minority groups, I think we'll find that we'll have fewer disqualifications and more teachers qualify on the new National Teachers Exam. There's a lot of work to be done on the revised National Teachers Exam. It's going through a process of validation. It's going through a process of studying the performance of Louisiana's first test takers on the new National Teachers Exam. But I think we'll find that there'll be an improvement by the time we get the new National Teachers Exam in place.
Xavier University and other institutions of higher learning have developed workshops to prepare students for the NTE.
We have run a program on standardized testing. It primarily works with students to make them feel more relaxed about tests, to understand when it is not appropriate to guess on the test. It provides a great deal of confidence building on the part of the students so that they are more prepared. We don't teach the test, but we try to prepare the students in such a way that they don't have that same phobia about standardized testing. I think that's probably the best that you can do. You can ask students to prepare for a test, but trying to cram 4 years of material or 3 years of material into a few evenings is just absolutely difficult. Throughout the next few months, we will certainly try to have a weekly testing program, not a testing program, but more of a workshop for our students who are going to take the test, to try to provide them with a sort of review of some of the material that they've covered over the last few years. I think that's the best you can do. Some people have found that coaching works, and administering certain forms of the test to students helps them to prepare better. But I think all that really does is settle them a bit and help them with their confidence building.
Now, with fewer black teachers in the classrooms, there is concern about the impact on black children.
I think there will be a serious impact, just from the standpoint, I think more particularly in areas in the South, where there have always been large numbers of minority teachers, or at least significant numbers of minority teachers. What we're actually talking about here is the importance of having those strong role models. It's the same way as if you're going to improve the shortage of science and mathematics teachers, you have to have good mathematics and science teachers there in front of their students who are committed to their field. The problem of image is certainly something that can be taken care of within communities. Parents and other relatives will have to play a stronger role in that. It's been some time since I've really spent a lot of time in in a school, but I think that certainly by the time that students reach 6th grade, they are at that impressionable age where significant others, such as teachers, begin to influence their lives. And the teaching profession has long been looked upon certainly as one of those very important areas. And I think we need to get more teachers primarily to focus in on some of those.
I don't think it will deprive them of a positive role model in the classroom, but I do feel that it has kept a lot of minorities probably from going into education, and probably even the non-minority persons. And the reason being because of the various cultures and opportunities or experiences, curriculum that are sponsored, or hey, let's say that are present in various areas.
What is the greatest joy in teaching?
For the mere fact that I am imparting something that I know, and that is knowledge to other children that will help them in the future.
The reason that I chose education for my career is because I loved working with children, being around children, and I have the patience that it takes to be a teacher, and the patience that it takes to understand students and understand their problems and know what they need and give them a foundation to go on in their life.
I was basically interested in the way young children learn. I've always been fascinated by the things that they say to you at such an early age, and that just made me choose education because I really want to help those children learn, because they need a lot of help in their early ages, you know, the early stages of life.
I have a great loving concern for children, and in my teenage years, I've always had a job working with the NAR program with children, and I just love being around them.
We hope you have enjoyed our report. We would really like to know your thoughts about today's program. Please send your comments to Folks, in care of Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 2618 Wooddale Boulevard, Baton Rouge, 70805.
Next week on Folks, we'll examine the role of blacks in the press and the media's accountability to the black community. Until next time, so long.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.